Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, your association's no-fluff playbook to navigating and thriving in Industry 4.0 or the digital marketplace. Each week, we bring expert insights to help you and your association stay ahead of the curve.
Hello, my name is Sherry Budziak, and I'm the host of the Association 4.0 podcast. I am also a co-founder of .org Community and founder and CEO of orgSource, a consultancy to associations. Today, my guest is Kevin Martlage. Kevin is a senior consultant with orgSource. He is also our expert on interpersonal dynamics and organizational culture. As a certified Myers Briggs practitioner, Kevin is adept at helping groups identify their unique DNA and maximize their team potential. A strategic innovator and communicator, Kevin enjoys helping organizations align teamwork and solutions to strategic goals. As my listeners know, I am passionate about helping leaders develop their skills for navigating these fast-paced digital markets. And culture plays a huge role in that process. So I am excited to have you on the show today, Kevin, and thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here, Sherry. I always appreciate the opportunity to join you.
So Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your role at orgSource.
Sure. My role at orgSource, I'm a senior consultant. And so, I've been with you guys for about 4.5 years now, believe it or not. And it seems just like yesterday, but
yeah.
I brought to the team my background of 25 plus years of primarily working in corporate America with FedEx, with Xerox, a big printing company out in New York City, and really just focused on the operational side of helping teams advance and organizations advance. I was able to meet you and Kevin when you were working with a project of my past employer at the International Society of Arboriculture. I was a director of certification, and that was my first time jumping into the association world. And I just absolutely loved it. And I remember every day going, how come I haven't joined this space earlier in my career? One thing led to another, and was able to join your team and make the move and now go impact all these other organizations that are your client, bringing not only my corporate and kind of operational background and team building experience from corporate America, but also in the association space. And it's just great being a part of your team, and, really been focused primarily on the strategic planning side of things and some project management with some of your clients. But here recently have transitioned over to, the culture side and really understanding what helps the team click and what good looks like and how you support that team as they advance and achieve their goals. Personally, I'm a father of 2 daughters in college. I've been married for 24 years, live here in Central Illinois, diehard Hoosier fan from Indiana. And in my free time, I coach my high school girls tennis team and a licensed basketball official and a volunteer executive board member for IndyCar Ministry and out of Indianapolis. And so really just all about how can I help serve other people and help other people identify and reach their goals and impact them in whatever way I possibly can. So it's a pleasure being here today. I just can't thank you enough for the opportunity to continue to work with orgSource.
That's great, Kevin. And we love having you. And obviously just your personal background, it gives everybody an idea of how much patience you have working being a coach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about it that way, but I guess I do.
So Kevin, I've been thinking and writing a lot about the importance of trust in successful cultures. What are your thoughts on this topic and the current status of trust among teams today?
I could probably talk for 3 hours on this topic, and I'm a true believer that trust is the lifeline and what I call the X factor of any organization and team. Without trust, it's tough for any relationship or team or organization to advance. It's tough to really take advantage of innovation and opportunities that you might have. And ultimately, without trust, you're not going to realize the true impact that you can have as a team or within any kind of relationship. And so, when I talk about trust with organizations and associations, I talk a lot about what's being left on the table. If you had a higher level of trust, what else could you achieve? What are the things that are currently impacting your team's ability to advance? And I can almost guarantee that most of the time, if you're to ask yourself that question, it's like there's a misalignment between where we're going and how to get there and what that means to everybody. And therefore, it's impacting trust, right? And so the more that we can build trust intentionally through communication, through alignment, through helping everybody understand kind of the why behind what we're doing and why we need to go do it, it's going to help continue to advance your team in ways that maybe you haven't realized before. And I think when you talk about the status of trust among association teams, I think it's no different than all the numerous corporate teams that I've worked with throughout my career, and even the ones that I've now helped in a consulting role, that trust has always kind of been that buzzword, right? And we don't really know, oh, we got to have trust. Well, there's a saying that says, trust comes in on footstep and out on horseback, meaning it takes a long time to build that trust, but as soon as something happens, it's out the door and you're starting to build it again. And so I think when you look at associations, there's a lot of mistrust between maybe the executive team and the board, or maybe between staff and the board, because there's one level removed, they're not interacting with them, and even between the staff and the members that you serve. There's got to be a lot of trust about that. And I think some of the people that I've worked with in the association space, they're some of the most passionate people in the world. There for a reason. They're there for a mission. They trust the mission of the organization. They trust the vision. But a lot of times they don't trust each other. And that's simply because there's a misunderstanding, or we have a disagreement as to what good looks like. And so I think there's a huge opportunity, especially for some of those organizations that are maybe struggling in certain areas, to take a deep dive into your culture and to say, okay, maybe it's a trust issue. Maybe it's just how we communicate. Maybe it's just how we resolve conflict. But if we're focused on building that trust intentionally, we're going to start to advance things in ways that you've probably never realized.
Yeah. So Kevin, where trust is in situations where it's in short supply, what can leaders do to address that situation?
The biggest thing is intentionality. Another word I always use is transparency, awareness, a lot of empathy. And I think that as a leader, you have to intentionally be aware of how you're impacting situations. And a lot of times we'll have leaders that go to a lot of training. They're like, I'm going to leadership development and all that kind of stuff, but we don't really focus on how they are impacting that situation and how they can build trust with that team. And so when you talk about intentionality and transparency and awareness, it's all about identifying what good looks like for your team and for your organization, and what good looks like, just like in our one-on-one conversation we're having here. If I'm interacting with you on a daily basis, what's good look like? I may think that I'm approaching that conversation perfect with no expectations, but you're walking out of the room going, boy, that just didn't go well. So how do we always look at intentionally aligning expectations around what good looks like and how we're impacting the situation? And I always have a term, I say, awareness grants you choice. And if you're aware of how your impact trust is currently having with your team, you then have a choice about how you can overcome that. But if you just turn a blind eye to trust, or you think, hey, there's other issues, you're never going to realize that impact that you may have. And so I'm all about intentionality and transparency and talking about it. Right. And if there's something that you think that trust isn't where it needs to be, let's have a discussion. Maybe I just didn't realize I was impacting it that way. Intentionality and transparency is just huge when it comes to trust, in my opinion.
So Kevin, as you know, I have this new keynote that I've been presenting. And one of the things I talk about too is empowering teams really creates trust and innovation. So
sure,
I think, just for moving organizations forward. And I give one example of, I was working for an association where they had me start a for-profit subsidiary to build websites for associations that nobody was doing. Like, we didn't know what we were doing.
Sure.
And I went to the CEO's office and I said, hey, what happens like if this doesn't work out? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll get you another job somewhere else in the association. So it was that I was able to take that as a very young employee for a medical society. And because he trusted me to figure it out, and I trusted him that I was still going to have a job, then I was able to just give the ability to trust the team to do something that we didn't know how to do. You know what I mean? It just, it just changes the whole dynamics of what we were doing. Because, in the back of my head, I had my mom going, what the heck? What job did you take? Like, what?
Sure.
What are you doing? So anyway, I do think it's really important. That starts to build like a different culture, right? So, in culture, you do a lot of work in culture, and culture is an ongoing exercise, right? I mean, it's something that we need to be paying attention to all the time. And, what are some strategies to keep good practice for communications and positive team dynamics at the top of everybody's agenda at an organization?
Sure. I think that, you said something key in that last example about how you went in to your boss and said, what if this doesn't work, right? You had a conversation. Whereas if you didn't have that conversation, you're constantly in your back of your mind going, oh my gosh, what happens if I fail? What happens if I fail? What happens if I fail? And that's why I talk about leaving it on the table. You're so focused, even subconsciously sometimes, you're so focused on what if this fails that you're not focused on the true deliverable of what you've been asked to do. And just having that simple conversation, and whether it eased your mind just enough that, okay, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can focus on this. You still had other concerns, right, that you were probably faced with. But it starts with having that conversation. Your boss eased your mind and said, it's okay. We'll find something else. And so that's where it starts. And so ongoing exercise that I like to have is identify what good looks like and talk about it and continue to calibrate and align around those things. And so in your situation that you had with your boss, you could easily say, okay, it would have been great if on day one onboarding, I know that, hey, if you have any concerns about anything, you have to come talk to me. I've set that expectation of what good looks like. And here's what that looks like. Send me an email, just pop in, whatever that may be. But we have to have that open line of communication. And so an ongoing exercise is, and some good strategies, is to spend some time. And this is the last thing on anybody's mind as you're in such a busy association environment with your members and all the fires that we typically are faced with. But you got to spend some intentional time identifying what good looks like for your culture and what are some things that you're absolutely going to stand for. And then how do we define that and how do we align around that? It's almost like doing a strategic plan for your culture. Here's where we're at. This is what we feel like we need to change. And this is how we're going to go change that. Do we all agree on what that looks like? Perfect. Now let's continue to move forward. That's the biggest strategy, is to talk about it, to be aware that, hey, that conversation didn't go like I felt like it should. Do you have a few minutes? Let's talk about that so we can change that going forward. And I think that's the biggest thing. And that goes to empowerment, that goes to trust, that goes to intentionality. You have to develop that culture and that environment where you can challenge each other, but then you also have understanding about what good looks like. And
Yeah.
you keep that at the forefront of your discussion.
Yeah, as you were talking, Kevin, kind of to follow up on the reason why Bob was approachable, and this was old school. It's a little harder to do today because of our remote environment, but
Sure.
he would walk around and give everybody their paychecks. And one day I said to him, I don't know why I said things, because, I was like a kid. I'm like, I just guess I had a big mouth. I don't know. But I said, Bob, like, there's tons of people here that can pass around the paychecks. Like, why are you doing that? And he said, oh, and I will add that he knew every single person's name at the organization. And it's, I mean, we had like 100 staff. So, whatever. And associations, people were coming and going. He said, because Sherry, that's the one time that I can make sure that I see every single staff person. I can see every single staff person every Friday when I'm passing out checks, which made him approachable, because otherwise he was in the big corner office. And the way that the building was set up, there was times that we wouldn't even see him. Right. So anyway, it's interesting. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, as we're talking about empowering staff, how do you think we can empower staff to experiment with new technologies? I mean, we're in this world of trying to trailblaze what this AI world means, and industry 4.0 and what's coming at us. So how can we kind of empower staff to experiment?
That's an interesting question. And I think culture definitely has a play in that. And I think back about some of the organizations I've worked for and the teams that I've worked for, where you didn't feel like there was that opportunity to experiment or to challenge or to bring up new ideas. And even though I maybe felt like I had great ideas, I never had that opportunity to mention that. Or if I did mention it, it was discounted right away. Or it's just like, yeah, why are you focused on that when you have this job to do? And so I think when it comes to empowerment, it's, again, going back to outlining what the boundaries are, what empowerment looks like, what are the guardrails that you need to stay within. And hey, if you have new ideas, here's how you bring it up. This is how we want you to bring it up, and let's discuss it. There's a time and a place for it. Or if you have a very open culture and, hey, if you got a great idea, just come in and interrupt me in my office and talk about it. And so I think you have to outline what those guardrails and what good looks like. And then you have to trust your team, to go back to our original topic about trust. I have to trust that if you feel strongly enough that you're bringing to me a new idea, I have to sit there and understand what it is, right? And we're going to have trust in each other that I may discount it, I may challenge you, but it means something to you, so it means something for me, right? And we're going to have to address that. And so we have to empower them to not only do their job, but to let them know, just like in your case, I trust that you're going to make the right decisions to make this work. And if it doesn't, we'll deal with that at that point in time. We've got another job for you. I think when it comes to empowering your staff, you got to have guardrails around it, but you also have to really focus on building that trusting culture where your team feels like they can be innovative. They can challenge the status quo. They could bring up new ideas, because as a leader, and I've been in that situation, you have teams that bring you ideas and there's so much other stuff going on. You're like, sorry, I can't deal with it right now. And you just shot them down. And so that's going to stifle their ability to experiment with new things or to bring new ideas or to empower them to do those things. And so it all goes back to trust and building those, guardrails and what good looks like, what those expectations are.
So Kevin, as we kind of wrap up here today, talk to me about how do you think associations can reimagine culture today?
Sure. I think it's interesting. Just give you my 2 cents on it because you asked, but I think there's really something to this whole concept of looking at, say, your traditional strategic planning that we've all done at some point in our career. And if you look at a strategic plan, you have to assess your current state. You have to identify your desired goals going forward. You have to create an operational plan around those things. You have to identify KPIs. You have to continue to reassess and calibrate over the next 3 to 5 years, whatever. And I think when it comes to reimaging your culture, it's almost the same process. You have to start by assessing where you're at now. What works, what doesn't work, what's holding us back from being supportive of each other, what's impacting our trust, what's impacting our communication, what's impacting our conflict resolution, whatever that means. We have to assess where we're at now. And then we have to identify what those goals are going forward. And once we identify that, if we say, we're going to stand for great, intentional, transparent communication. Okay, what's that look like? How do we define that? How do we each impact those things? From a leadership standpoint, these are the things I'm going to do. From an employee standpoint, these are the things you have to do. So you got to identify what good looks like and make sure we're both on the same page. Everybody in the team is on the same page as to what that looks like and how they interpret it. And then you have to continuously reassess those things and put some things in place to do that. Okay, to get to that goal of intentional communication, we have to have some training around intentional communication. So how are we going to do that? We're going to bring in a consultant. We're going to do online training. We're going to read a book, whatever it might be. But we have to provide those steps to be able to reach our goal of having great intentional communication because we think it's important to our culture. And so associations, every one of your clients, they're great at what they do. They're impactful in their industry to their members and all that kind of stuff. And so let's reimage the culture piece by starting to look at what's important to us, what works, what doesn't, how you define that, and then how we're going to get there. And then we have to just be committed to making sure that we do that. And the good organizations, the teams that are really defined and focused on their culture, they maybe start every meeting with that. Hey, how's the culture going today? How are we doing in communication? How are we doing in conflict resolution? How are we, whatever it might be, before you get into the rest of it. And you're incorporating some of these key traits or key things that you've identified that are important for your team into your day-to-day. And you'll start to reimage your culture just by focusing on a few things here and there.
That's great. Well, Kevin, I appreciate your time today. If anybody who is listening wants to learn more from Kevin on how he can work with your organization on culture, or you're looking for coaching, you can either contact Kevin at martlage@orgsource.com, or you can reach out to me at sherry@orgsource.com. We'd love to have further conversations with you. So thanks so much for joining me today, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It's always a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. orgSource specializes in positioning teams for success with solutions for technology, strategy, and marketing. Please contact us at info@orgsource.com or visit www.orgsource.com to find out how to keep your organization on track to Association 4.0.